Estate.
Hello, welcome to the Fifth Estate. I'm Hannah Gartner. Tonight, a Fifth Estate exclusive, a secret flight, a secret weapon, and a big score for Canada's secret spies. It was like nothing the world had ever seen. Russia had built a true super weapon, a torpedo that flew underwater like a rocket. They called it the Shkval.
To get a weapon to do that speed underwater and stay stable to its target is a massive breakthrough, and it's something that, quite frankly, the West never thought about doing.
Western powers were dying for a look. The world's top secret agents went on the hunt. For some, that led to betrayal and disaster. You're guilty, you're a spy, espionage, James Bond, 20 years.
Yeah.
What you're
and
sitting
hard labor, they specified too. You're going to Siberia.
But for one highly skilled Canadian operative, it was mission possible, laid out in top secret dispatches.
I think it's quite remarkable for Canadian eyes only. Those are very, very high-level security documents.
It's tempting to think, with the end of the Cold War and the shift of world attention to terrorism, that the classic scenario of spy versus spy is all over and done with. Tempting, but wrong. The spies and operatives are still at it, busy as ever in their shadowy world. And tucked away in a corner of our Defense Department is just such an operation. Unknown to the public, it works to acquire the world's most secret and advanced weapons. Its story has never been told, its very existence concealed. But now, after an extensive Fifth Estate investigation, we can reveal its operations and the hidden reasons why little Canada is a big player in the twilight world of spies, lies, and secret weapons. The halftime show is always sweeter if your team has the bigger guns. This is Russia's colossal military garage sale. It's in the remote Ural Mountains, but the hardware is worth the hike, especially for those in the elite club of buyers, sellers, and spies. These tanks and guns may end up in the hands of a dictator somewhere, but some of it will reappear in secret warehouses in the United States of America. Part of a covert program called Foreign Materiel Acquisition, or FMA. And you would be amazed at what you can get. Journalist Ken Silverstein.
Oh, huge radar stations, huge systems, missile systems, torpedoes, major tanks, attack helicopters. I mean, we've shipped all of this stuff out of the former East Bloc back to the United States.
The USSR may have collapsed, but Russian military technology is still considered first-rate. That's why the United States wants it and will go to just about any lengths to get it, to study, copy, and do one better. FMA is foreign materiel acquisition, but sometimes it crosses the line into espionage.
Operations where we've obtained things by nefarious means directly are incredibly difficult to plan and then to execute, because you have to find somebody, and you don't know who the somebody is yet, in a foreign country who has access to whatever it is you want, has a means of obtaining it, and then either he provides or you provide to him a way to smuggle it out of the country.
Ted Schaefer was deputy director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which maintains a wish list, the 20 most wanted weapons. He's not allowed to talk specifics, but he is very frank about the black market. If you don't buy it, you steal it.
But you can't always steal it. I mean, you're looking for things that to another country's military are their family jewels. And what would motivate somebody in, let's say, the former Soviet Union to steal a piece of military equipment and give it to us? It's certainly not patriotism. It's something called money. whose hand has to be blessed with cash, and it's always cash or diamonds or gold or something that's readily transferable into cash.
These multi-million-dollar transactions take place in the international capitals of the world, like Vienna, where middlemen mingle with secret agents and spies. A ruthless business where dealers do what they have to get what they want.
Most of them are not very pleasant characters. They're generally something less than honest. They're conniving, they're devious, and they often don't tell the truth.
Spies and lies make for a very dangerous game with no get-out-of-jail-free card.
If he's caught, at a minimum, he's certainly going to spend a long time in jail in his own country.
And you wouldn't help him? You wouldn't be in a position to help him?
Probably not.
It's all about shady deals. And investigative journalist Ken Silverstein knows all about it. He says the U.S. government uses middlemen to keep its hands clean. I understand that it is against the law for an American to bribe someone in a foreign country.
Oh, absolutely. We're very, very, very strict about that. There's even a law, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Americans are strictly forbidden from bribing foreign officials. It's against the law. You go to jail for that. So we employ people, and they give the bribes. We don't know anything about it.
The Ottawa suburb of Canada is about as far as you can get from the fast lane of international espionage and seven-figure bribes. It is home to our government's main man in the arms acquisition game. He is 58-year-old Brian Harrison. For years, his official title was Scientific Advisor, Department of National Defense.
To all outward appearances, he's just the typical bland bureaucrat. He's a guy who could be, taking your picture down at the Department of Motor Vehicles or something. I mean, he's not someone who appears to be terribly charismatic or to outward appearances mysterious, or, he certainly doesn't look like Sean Connery as James Bond. I don't think he's the sort of guy that has all sorts of beautiful women hanging on his every word.
Brian Harrison is also not the sort of guy who wants to talk to us. But we know that the secret military branch he works for is called J2. One of the few people in Ottawa who knows anything about J2 is intelligence expert Martin Rudner.
The purpose of intelligence is to take other people's secrets. It's not considered polite or appropriate for a government to say we have an organization in our midst as part of a government whose job it is to steal other people's secrets.
But we do have an organization that steals other people's secrets or buys them with untraceable cash. It is called J2, and it's right next door to the Parliament buildings. But it's also secret. Even our politicians don't know the details.
It's not the job of the parliamentarians to micromanage the intelligence process. It's their job to ensure that the intelligence process conforms to Canadian law and to Canadian policies.
But Brian Harrison's work isn't strictly a Canadian operation. According to investigative journalist Ken Silverstein, Harrison's marching orders often come from Washington.
Brian is more or less the super spy from Canada who's overseeing this entire operation. He basically is running this program for Canada, but really at the behest of the United States, which is the prime beneficiary. So Brian is involved in all aspects of this program. He goes to Vienna where he meets with the arms dealers. They'll huddle in a cafe in Vienna and over a coffee discuss the details of what's going to be bought and who's going to get what money and just work out all the arrangements. Then he goes off to Ukraine, for example, and he'll stay in a discreet hotel there and accompany some of the brokers to meetings with military officials or go directly to the factory itself.
A case in point. Just 4 years ago, the U.S. was very eager to acquire a couple of Russian air-to-air missiles with unique electronics and homing systems. So Brian Harrison headed for Kiev in the Ukraine, a place where weapons have a habit of disappearing from military storage facilities. We have obtained documents which show how the deal was brokered. In this secret memo dated April 1998, an arms dealer writes to Brian Harrison, "Your meetings in Kiev have been arranged. The price for each missile? $700,000 US. But covert arms deals never run smoothly, and there is one delay after another. Harrison's impatient. He tells the arms dealer, "A lot of formal arrangements have already been made between Canada and the US, which are extremely difficult to change." Washington is getting very anxious. But finally, everything gets resolved, and the missiles are loaded onto a chartered aircraft. The Fifth Estate has obtained this flight schedule. It shows the missiles lifted off from UKKM, that's Kiev in the Ukraine. After a journey of 12,500 kilometers and 2 refueling stops, the missiles quietly arrive at their secret destination, CYBG. That's a Canadian military base at Bagotville, Quebec. The quiet man from Canada had scored again. And because the shipment came with all sorts of official-looking export documents and receipts, the whole transaction looked perfectly above board.
Oh, that's bull. I mean, it's not all above board, and it's done in secret. And try to find out information from your government about this program. You're not going to get very far at all. It's all, just like in the United States, it's national security. We can't talk about it. And so, you know, none of the paperwork is available. Nobody really knows where the money is going and how much of it is being siphoned off to pay for bribes and to corrupt these officials to get these weapons. It's certainly not an above-board business.
It has to be secret because the nature of getting the secrets of possible adversaries has to be secret. We don't want to tell them what we know, and we don't want to tell them how we're going about the business of securing the information we need to protect ourselves.
What happened next? The missiles went to the United States, where they were studied and tested.
Today, especially as weapon systems that the bad guys have get more and more complicated and can do more and more things, oftentimes, unless you can really get your hands on one of them and take it apart and see how it really works, you don't know what its capabilities fully are. And you certainly don't know what its vulnerabilities are.
And then there are the secrets within the secrets.
Many weapon systems have what are called war reserve modes of operation. They're never used in peacetime. And the reason for that is to give you an advantage. If you don't use it, but you have it, and the enemy collects intelligence on what he has seen about that weapon system, but he doesn't get his hands on one, then he knows nothing about this war reserve mode.
Americans and Canadians cooperate closely in many parts of the weapons acquisitions business. This is a torpedo test range in Nanu's Bay, British Columbia. It's operated jointly by Canada and the US. This is where we developed the next generation of torpedoes. In the spy game, a torpedo is called a fish. And a great many Russian fish have been purchased on the black market by Canada's secret agent, Brian Harrison. This is a memo to Harrison from an arms dealer setting up a special delivery of Russian fish. It says, this delivery includes 4 fishes with export heads and fuses. Although the Americans were getting a steady supply of Russian hardware, there was one torpedo that had always eluded them. The Russian Northern Fleet is on the move. While the Russian economy is not in great shape, the admirals can still put on quite a show. There are more than 30 ships taking part in these war games. When it comes to the Russian Navy, the U.S. takes nothing for granted. American spy satellites are monitoring these war games, and their subs are lurking nearby, because every time the Americans underestimate the Russians, they get a nasty surprise.
They still spy against us, we still spy against them, and you'd be a fool not to. One of the things we were certainly most interested in were communications cryptographic systems, because that's the keys to the kingdom. If you can read their communications, it gives you a tremendous advantage. And of course, the Soviets did the same thing against us. Back in 1985, it was called the Year of the Spy, and we had a very bad spy ring called the Walker spy ring, and it was estimated when it was all over that the Soviets had probably read 1 million naval messages that were classified.
And they vowed it would never happen again, huh?
Well, we always try to do our best to make sure it never happens, but...
That was a wake-up.
Yes, it was.
Russia's most famous spy was recently promoted, and he's paying a special visit to the fleet today. Vladimir Putin, the one-time KGB secret agent, is now in charge of the Russian armed forces. Putin was only too aware that in recent years, Russia had been losing the intelligence war to the Americans. Under his watch, all this was going to change. The Navy brass loved this spy who came in from the cold. Security would be beefed up, and Putin was going to raise wages and build new subs. Vice Admiral Valery Dorogin.
President Putin perfectly understands that the renaissance of our Navy is very important to us. Our latest submarines are better than the American ones and reflect the technical superiority of the former Soviet Union.
Dorogin boasts that Russia's money problems have not stopped them from developing a superweapon that could blow the Americans right out of the water.
Our superweapon, called Shkval, is the perfect weapon. It has no matches in the world.
And that is the one weapon the Americans so desperately wanted. The idea behind the Shkval evolved some 40 years ago, while the Russians were trying to improve their hydrofoil technology. The problem was overcoming water resistance. And once they figured out how to reduce drag, they began toying with the notion of something that could travel underwater at incredible speeds. Former British intelligence officer John Downing.
Like a lot of projects the Russians and the Soviets before them have embarked on, they often show us a complete breakthrough in military technology. They've always gone for the West's Achilles heel. From an engineering point of view, I think this concept is brilliant and the engineering achievement is brilliant. To get a weapon to do that speed underwater and stay stable to its target is a massive breakthrough, and it's something that, quite frankly, the West never thought about doing. The Russians often come up with something that the West have never thought of, and they doggedly pursue it until they get to their target. And I think with Shkval, it's a tremendous breakthrough. And I think it took a lot of us by surprise when we found out they really had got a weapon that did this speed. And don't forget, as I said earlier, they're working on one that won't do 300 knots, 30 miles every 6 minutes. That's massive.
Designers created a fearsome weapon, part missile, part torpedo, and it could travel 5 times faster than any conventional torpedo, screaming through the water at 360 kilometers an hour.
Now, this is a threat to the Canadian forces. We have ships in the Arabian Sea, we have ships in the Pacific, which could be there on operational missions, and a very fast torpedo, which would elude our anti-submarine and anti-torpedo technologies, would be a deadly danger.
But in order to reach such astronomical speeds, the Shkval was powered by a rocket engine that used a dangerously volatile fuel mixture. It would take 10 years before American naval intelligence got wind of this Russian breakthrough.
A lot of very, very impressive people, some four-star admirals and others, still didn't believe it, even in the face of hard fact that it really existed.
Ed Pope, an all-American from Oregon, joined the Navy in 1969. He ended up in intelligence and became a specialist in Soviet bloc weaponry.
I spent 22 years as a professional naval intelligence officer. I had close to 200 compartmented clearances, things that I can never talk about the rest of my life.
How does the Shkval torpedo work?
It's a jet propulsion system, but they just bleed part of that propulsive gas off, and it's funneled up to the nose of this torpedo. The gas then envelops the torpedo as it's moving through the water. So, and in effect, what you end up with is it's flying in air that it generates itself. So it's creating its own bubble of air and flying with a jet propulsive system through that bubble.
This is footage of a Shkval prototype from 1994, obtained by the Fifth Estate. The phenomenal speed and destructive power convinced the Americans. The Shkval torpedo went to the top of that special wish list. Investigative journalist Ken Silverstein says the Pentagon was prepared to spend millions to acquire that secret technology.
And there are some people who think that this is a potentially devastating weapon, it's a breakthrough weapon, and that it's absolutely critical that the United States understands how that weapon works so that we can figure out how to defeat it if need be.
In 1995, Ed Pope, the man with all the secrets, retired after 22 years in naval intelligence. He started making regular trips to Moscow. Communism was collapsing, and Pope said he was lining up some business opportunities.
And it was right out of the Wild West. Here was a rich American, and I had lines of these people want to sell me electronics, medical instruments, microwave devices.
However, the Russian secret police were suspicious. Perhaps Pope was still working for his old bosses at Naval Intelligence. They watched, and they followed, and they bugged his hotel room. Bingo. The man in this murky video just happened to be one of Russia's most famous scientists, Anatoly Babkin, one of the masterminds behind the Shkval torpedo. The Russian scientist was getting thousands of dollars, and Ed Pope was getting a wealth of information. The celebration was premature. Suddenly, the secret police swarmed into the hotel room shooting their own reality video. Ed Pope went from being an American businessman bringing capitalism to Russia to a Yankee crook stealing state secrets.
To the best of my knowledge, I have no such documents.
Pope was cool. He never admitted anything. He thought it would all get cleared up quickly. After all, the Cold War was over. Not altogether. Ed Pope became the first American to be charged with espionage in Russia in 40 years. And the Russian media ate it up. The hero of the piece turned out to be President Vladimir Putin, who had decided to make an example of this American. It took a spy to catch a spy.
They wanted to make it a big, splashy show trial. So, oh yes, we just captured America's James Bond. And at another point, they called me the Trojan horse of the American Secret Services. I got a good laugh out of that one, too.
The Cold War was supposed to be over. Not here, at the very top of the world in the frigid waters of the Barents Sea. On a foggy August morning 2 years ago, The Kursk, one of the deadliest Russian submarines, was beginning a test run. Published reports said the crew would be testing an improved version of the Shkval torpedo. Lurking in the distance, hoping to get a glimpse of the Russian superweapon, was an American spy sub. The Kursk was cruising slowly at periscope depth, getting ready to fire the first of 2 test torpedoes. The order was given to latch the torpedo door and secure action stations for firing. Seconds ticked by, then something went terribly wrong. At 11:24, a major explosion in the torpedo room. The sub fell 300 meters and crashed into the seabed. The explosion completely atomized the torpedo room. There were no survivors. Across Russia, the sinking of the Kursk was seen as a national tragedy. Relatives demanded answers, but all they got were lies and a cover-up. Soviet style. Now watch carefully. You can see a secret policewoman with a hypodermic needle sedate the distraught woman. Finally, the relatives' unrelenting pressure to raise the Kursk and retrieve the bodies got some action. But the Russians did not have the technology or the know-how to raise the sub themselves. And when international experts were brought in for the job, the secrets of the explosion started to leak out.
My name is John Large. I'm a nuclear engineer.
John Large is also an expert on submarines and a key player in the salvage operation. Large has no doubts about what killed the Kursk. How did you know for certain that it was the Shkval torpedo that caused the Kursk to blow up?
Well, the main reason was we were told by Admiral Barskov, the second-in-command of the Northern Fleet.
Why has Russia been so reluctant to say that it was the Shkval torpedo that sunk the Kursk?
Who knows? Pride, some misled military secrecy. We've been rolled in
the torpedo room on a decommissioned Russian submarine, John Large helps us piece together what actually happened in those minutes before the Kursk exploded.
A trial torpedo was loaded into the tube, and we know that the tube door was closed. We know the compartment was ready to actually fire the torpedo, which meant that the door to the stern section was opened. Something happened while it was in the tube. It either jammed, or the gas generator went wrong, or the propellant ignited. That meant inside the tube there was an acetylene type of flame that either burnt its way through or blew this door open. This door then sprayed on this acetylene this acetylene sort of flame onto the magazine racks that are loaded in this section, full of fully armed torpedoes, each carrying their 200 or so kilograms of Torpex, torpedo explosive, on their nose end. So that situation, for about 135 seconds, prevailed. These obviously reached a temperature, a detonation temperature, and then we had seven of these, go off virtually simultaneously in a fifth of a second. That would have caused absolute chaos, would have blown this compartment to smithereens, an enormous hole big enough to drive 2 London double-decker buses through here, and then smashed all of five bulkheads through to the reactor compartment completely to smithereens.
It was also a PR disaster that blew up in President Vladimir Putin's face. Initially, Putin refused to interrupt his holidays, and when he finally did fly back to Moscow, Russians saw him as cold and unfeeling. But good timing and opportunity helped the old spy bounce back. The American charged with trying to steal the secret of the Shkval was awaiting trial.
There were people in the press over there that somehow decided that I was part of this explosion. It involved the Shkval, therefore I was guilty. It was a submarine accident. That American spy. is guilty some way. He surely had something to do with this.
Putin's government accepted no blame for the disaster that cost the nation billions of dollars and 118 souls. The Kursk was raised last October and hauled into the port of Murmansk in the middle of the night. As compensation, the Russian government paid $18,000 to each dead crewman's family. Vice Admiral Valery Dorogin says they should be proud.
Every sailor should be ready to sacrifice himself in the name of the glorious motherland. Look, there's always a risk when we're using complex technologies. We all have our sympathies for the dead, but we do not become less confident in our weaponry. On the contrary, I know submarine officers who today use the same weapons, and they are not afraid to do this.
It could be a scene right out of a Tom Clancy bestseller. American businessman scours Russia for promising technology and gets thrown into jail charged with espionage. And his own government? They wouldn't be able to help him. Were you a spy?
No.
But even if you had been spying, would you confess that to me here?
No, I wouldn't if I were.
Even if you had been a spy?
Yes.
You wouldn't...
A good spy would never admit it.
Ed Pope was cut off and alone. The judge said, throw away the key. You're guilty. You're a spy. Espionage. James Bond, 20 years.
Yes.
What you're
and hard labor, they specified too. You're going to Siberia, and we're going to allow you absolute minimal contact with your family.
That worked for President Putin. His approval rating rebounded from the Kursk catastrophe. Russia had stood up to the Americans, and Putin sent a message to the world. Treason and corruption would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Naval officer Igor Kordin.
Pope knew that what he was doing wasn't legitimate. Look, as a former naval attaché, he knew, he was entirely aware that this was confidential, classified information, and that he was involved in unlawful activity.
But the saga of the Shkval didn't end here. Remember the quiet Canadian, Brian Harrison? This is where the man from Canada comes back into the story. It turns out Harrison had been wheeling and dealing to buy the Shkval all along. As far back as 1998, Harrison had been meeting with his Austrian arms dealer, who had a hot tip. There just might be a few Shkval torpedoes on the loose in the former Soviet Republic of Kyrgyzstan. So Harrison and the Austrian ended up 3,000 kilometers from Moscow at a secret torpedo range to check out the merchandise. For an arms dealer, this was the holy grail. The Shkval was 8.5 meters long and weighed 2,700 kilograms. The price tag, $12 million US. Defense expert John Downing.
And were Canada to actually acquire this weapon, it would be a great feather in Ottawa's cap. And the rest of the intelligence community would be very impressed. And so Canada's standing in intelligence and in the arms market would increase. And obviously Canada would get something back. So it's not surprising that Canada will wish to go for it.
But when word leaked out about the deal, the Russian secret police put a stop to it. Russian Vice Admiral Valery Dorogin says the Americans should give up trying to get the Shkval. It's just not going to happen.
It doesn't matter how hard they try, they won't get it.
But Canada's Brian Harrison was not going to give up that easily. After a lot of patient effort, he found a new contact in Russia with access to a few of the super torpedoes. And this time, it was someone who could deliver. The identity of the contact is revealed in these heavily censored documents obtained by the Fifth Estate. Subject, the Shkval torpedo. Harrison writes, Russian President Vladimir Putin has recently approved the sale of this torpedo to Canada. and there is therefore a possibility that members of his delegation will bring up the sale during his upcoming visit to Canada. Martin Rudner.
I think it's quite remarkable. Some of the documents which you've obtained had for Canadian eyes only. Those are very, very high-level security documents which weren't intended as such to even be shared by our allies, our nearest and dearest.
Spies and lies. Putin called it espionage when Ed Pope tried to buy the secrets of the Shkval. And then, with Ed Pope still in jail, Putin turned around and sold the very same secrets to Canada.
From Mr. Putin's point of view, he controlled access to the secret by dealing with Canada. He received what he felt was, I'm sure, the appropriate price. He possibly also received reciprocity in terms of intelligence information. He certainly provided a resource to Canada and therefore to Canadian allies, which will earn him credits in international affairs.
For Vladimir Putin, who was honored at several functions today, there was more good news on the trade front.
When the Russian president arrived in Ottawa, just days after Brian Harrison wrote his memo, everyone seemed happy. There were handshakes, trade agreements, and a toast to international cooperation. But back in Moscow, there is one Navy man who would be disillusioned to discover a senior member in his government had sold state secrets to the West.
Я бы сказал, подонки есть в любой стране. Просто с ними надо бороться.
I would have to say that there are scoundrels in every government. You simply have to fight them.
Meanwhile, Ed Pope had been languishing in his Russian jail cell for 8 months. Failing health prompted the United States government to petition the Russians for a pardon. It was granted, and convicted spy Ed Pope was finally free to go back home to Pennsylvania.
I was going through my trial.
When we sat down with Pope, we showed him the Canadian documents laying out Brian Harrison's secret deal with President Putin.
So they were continuing this negotiation and discussion while they were trying me for trying to steal it from them.
That's correct. That's the point.
No, this is something I never... It's disgusting.
So let's make a list. Who all was lying to you, Mr.
Well,
Pope?
let's make an easier list. Who wasn't lying? Who wasn't lying? It's hard to tell. Clearly, unequivocally now, Putin was lying. In the last few months, I'd started to waver on him. No more. They were playing a game with me. The Russians were, the American government was, and the Canadian government was part of it.
British defense analyst John Downing says that in the big chess game of intelligence, one pawn is always expendable. Why did Canada not say anything? Because while they were trying to obtain it, that's when Pope was sitting in jail. Wouldn't it have been the honorable thing to do to say, get this guy out of jail?
Well, honour and intelligence don't necessarily sit happily in bed together. If you go for an objective, you go for a target, and you go for it quite ruthlessly with as little risk as you possibly can.
Meanwhile, back in Ottawa at the Department of National Defense, the lights are burning into the night. There's a new American wish list, new weapons to be found, and new deals to be done. Not surprisingly, the central players in this story would not talk to us on camera. However, a few days ago, we did hear from DND's media liaison. But Lieutenant Commander Ken McKillop would only confirm that Canada did try to get the Shkval. He wouldn't talk about secret deals or mysterious flights, and he claimed Canada's efforts were really nothing out of the ordinary. But he did offer Canadians this comforting reassurance. Our government has never planned to use the Shkval as an offensive weapon.